Edward, 32. For the better part of a decade, I was a bartender, not just some guy slinging drinks at a chain restaurant. I was a real bartender, at a real place. Let's call it the Oak. It was one of those spots that's been around forever. Dark wood, low lighting, leather booths worn smooth over the years. Not fancy, but comfortable, reliable. The owner was an old-timer, a guy who knew that the secret to a good business was good people and consistency. He hired me when I was barely out of my early 20s, saw something in me, I guess, taught me how to do the job right, how to remember a regular's drink, how to listen when someone needed to talk, and how to stay quiet when they didn't. The Oak was more than a restaurant. It was a community hub. We had the after-work crowd from the nearby office buildings, groups of friends meeting up on weekends, older couples who had been coming for their date night for 20 years. It was a well-oiled machine. The heart of that machine, besides the old owner, was Jane. Jane was our head chef, a woman in her 50s who had been running that kitchen since before I was hired. She was tough, no nonsense, and demanded perfection. But she was fair. She treated her kitchen staff like family, and they'd run through a brick wall for her. The food was incredible because she cared. Classic stuff, done perfectly. Steaks, burgers, a fish dish that was locally famous. My domain was the bar. It was a long, beautiful piece of polished oak that gave the place its name. I knew the regulars by name, and they knew me. I'd have a guy's scotch on the rocks waiting for him as he walked through the door. I knew which of the ladies preferred a little extra olive juice in their martinis. It was a good job. The pay was steady, and the tips were great. Not because we had some gimmick, but because we provided genuine service. People felt welcome. They wanted to come back, and they showed their appreciation. The staff was a solid crew. A few waitresses had been there for years. We all got along. No drama. We showed up, did our jobs well, and went home with full pockets. It was a simple, honest living. We were successful because we gave people what they wanted, a damn good meal and a comfortable place to relax. Then, a few months back, the old owner passed away. It hit us all pretty hard. He was a good man, a great boss. The funeral was packed. Half the attendees were current and former staff. The other half were longtime customers. After that, there was this period of uncertainty. The restaurant was closed for a week. We were all on paid leave, but nobody knew what was going to happen. Rumors started flying. Maybe his kids would sell it. Maybe it would just close for good. Jane was the one who kept us all calm. She told us to hang tight, that the owner had a plan. A week or so later, we all got an email calling for an all-staff meeting. The place was being inherited by his niece. None of us had ever met her. We all showed up that afternoon. The place felt weird being empty and quiet. Then she walked in. Ivana, she was probably in her mid-20s, dressed in clothes that looked expensive but didn't quite fit the vibe of the Oak. She had this intense, energetic look in her eyes. She introduced herself, told us how much her uncle loved this place, and how she wanted to honor his legacy by carrying it into the future. Sounded good on the surface. But then she started talking more. She started using a lot of buzzwords, talking about reevaluating the brand's core message and creating a more intentional space. I exchanged a look with Jane across the room. Jane's face was unreadable, like a stone mask. Ivana took a walk around the dining room, looking at everything. She mentioned the decor was a bit traditional, and the menu was heavy on the classics. You could feel the mood in the room shift. We were all proud of this place exactly as it was. She told us not to worry, that she wasn't planning any drastic changes right away. She just wanted to observe for a bit. For the next week, that's what she did. She'd sit in a corner booth with a laptop, typing furiously. She watched the staff. She watched the customers. It was a little unnerving. It felt like we were specimens in a jar. The regulars noticed her too. Some of them asked me who the new face was. I just said she was the new owner, keeping it simple. Things felt tense. The easy, comfortable vibe of the place was gone, replaced by this feeling of being constantly watched. After about a week of this, another staff meeting was called. This time, she had a presentation ready on her laptop. We all gathered around as she stood up, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She started by thanking us for our hard work and dedication. Then she launched into a speech. It was a lot like the first one, but more intense. She talked about how businesses have a social responsibility, how our restaurant, being in a position of influence in the community, had a duty to promote progressive values. She talked a lot about the world being an unequal place. Then she started talking about male toxicity, how men, historically and currently, hold a position of power and privilege that is often invisible to them. A couple of the younger waitresses were nodding along. Most of us, especially the veteran staff, just stood there, confused about where this was going. I just wanted her to get to the point. And then she did. She announced her first major policy change. She was implementing what she called a social justice surcharge. The room was dead silent. She explained it. From now on, any bill paid for by a male customer would have an automatic 15% surcharge added to it. Not a tip, a surcharge, a separate line item on the check. She said this was a way to acknowledge the gender pay gap and to act as a small reparational gesture for the systemic privileges men experience. The silence in the room stretched on. You could have heard a pin drop. She went on to explain that the money collected from this surcharge would not go to the staff directly. It would be put into a special fund. Part of this fund would be used for female staff empowerment workshops, and the rest would be donated to certain charities she supported. Finally, one of the waitresses, a girl who had been with us for 5 years, raised her hand. She asked if this meant that regular tips would be affected. Ivana gave her a condescending smile. The new policy, she said, was about the principle, not about personal enrichment. She was sure our customers would appreciate the chance to contribute to a more equitable world and would continue to tip generously for good service. My stomach dropped. I knew our customers. I knew that was not going to happen. I raised my hand. She pointed at me. Edward, yes? I kept my voice as level as possible. Ivana, how would you like us to explain this to the customers, to the men who have been coming here every week for years? Her smile tightened. You'll explain it as it is. It's a policy designed to promote fairness. It's an opportunity to start a conversation. If some men are made uncomfortable by being asked to confront their privilege, then perhaps this isn't the right establishment for them anymore. We're curating a new community. I just stared at her. Curating a new community. She wanted to throw away the community we already had. Jane spoke up for the first time. Her voice was cold and calm. Have you considered the business implications of this, Ivana? Ivana turned to her. The moral implication is more important than the business implication, Jane. Some things are more important than profit. Jane just nodded slowly, her face still a perfect mask. But I knew her well enough to see the storm brewing in her eyes. The meeting ended. We all just kind of stood there, stunned. The new policy was to be implemented the next day. The point-of-sale system was already being updated. There was no discussion. It was a decree. That night, the atmosphere was terrible. We all did our jobs, but the energy was gone. We all knew a bomb was about to go off. The next day, it began. The first test case came during the lunch rush. An older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. They came in every week, always sat at the same table. They had their meal, everything was normal, the waitress brought them the check. Mr. Henderson, a classic gentleman, took it without a second thought. A minute later, he called the waitress back over. He was pointing at the check, looking confused. I could see the whole thing from behind the bar. The poor waitress, trying to follow orders, started reciting the little script Ivana had given her about social justice and the pay gap. Mr. Henderson's confusion turned into disbelief. But it was Mrs. Henderson who got angry. She stood up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. She said she found the policy deeply insulting, that her husband was a good man, and they were here to have a nice lunch, not to be lectured or punished. She said it was embarrassing, and that they would not be coming back. They paid the exact amount, including the surcharge, and left no tip. I saw the waitress come back to the service station, looking like she was about to cry. That evening was worse. I had a group of 4 guys at the bar. They were regulars, came in every week after their softball game. They'd usually run up a decent tab. Good guys, always tipped well, never caused any trouble. When it was time to settle up, one of them threw his card on the bar. I had to do it. I added the surcharge. I explained the new policy. Unlike the Hendersons, they didn't get angry. They just started laughing. One of them said, "You've got to be kidding me." I just shook my head. New owner, new rules. The guy who was going to pay took his card back. "All right, new plan," he said to his friends. "We're all paying separately." So they did. They split the bill 4 ways, paid with their own cards, and there was no surcharge. But the mood was ruined. They finished their drinks and left. They didn't leave a tip, and I haven't seen them since. The worst one I saw that week was a young couple on what looked like a first date. They were getting along great, laughing, making conversation. It was going well. Then the check came. The guy, trying to be a gentleman, reached for it. The waitress had to give him the speech. The mood at the table instantly died. It became awkward. The girl looked embarrassed. The guy looked like he'd just been accused of a crime. They started this quiet, tense discussion about who should pay. The magic was gone. The date was over. They ended up splitting the bill. He looked so dejected as they left. It was a perfect example of how to ruin a human connection with a stupid policy. By the end of the first week, the pattern was clear. Our customer base was split into 3 groups: the ones who got angry and vowed never to return, the ones who found it ridiculous and just stopped coming, and the ones who tried to work around it, creating awkward situations that made them not want to come back. Ivana, however, saw it as a roaring success. She'd walk around the half-empty dining room with a proud look on her face. She told us that the negative elements were weeding themselves out. She was completely detached from reality. The real impact was felt by the staff. Our tips vanished overnight. People were either angry at the policy and didn't tip, or they saw the 15% surcharge and considered that the tip, even though we never saw a dime of it. The waitresses who had been making a comfortable living were now struggling. They were stressed and miserable. The friendly atmosphere among the staff was gone, replaced with resentment. Some of them tried to talk to Ivana. They explained that their income had been cut in half. Ivana showed no sympathy. She told them that focusing on money was short-sighted, that they were part of an important social movement. One girl quit on the spot. She said she had rent to pay and couldn't afford to be part of a social movement. Ivana just scoffed as she walked away. The second week was when the numbers started to become undeniable. The place was a ghost town. Our lunch rush, which used to be a frantic, non-stop hour of controlled chaos, now consisted of a handful of tables. The evenings were even worse. I'd stand behind the bar for hours with no one to talk to. The lively hum of the oak was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence. This was when Jane decided to act. I saw her go into the office with a binder full of papers. She was in there with Ivana for almost an hour. I found out later what happened. Jane had printed out all the sales reports. She showed Ivana, in black and white, the reality of the situation. Revenue was down over 40% compared to the same period last year. Customer count was down by more than half. Food costs were spiraling out of control because she was ordering for a full restaurant and we were serving a handful of people. Most of it was going to waste. She laid it all out. The business was bleeding money, fast. She told Ivana that if things continued this way, the oak wouldn't survive another month. Jane wasn't emotional. She was just stating facts. She advised her, as the person who knew this business inside and out, to repeal the policy immediately, to try and win back the customers they had lost. Ivana's reaction was predictable. She got defensive. She accused Jane of having internalized patriarchal values. She said Jane was only looking at outdated metrics of success. She told her that she was building a new model, and it took time. That profit wasn't the goal. The message was the goal. Jane just sat there and listened to it all. When Ivana was finished with her tirade, Jane closed her binder. She stood up and told Ivana that she had dedicated 15 years of her life to this restaurant, that she had respected the old owner and she respected the business they had built, and that she would not stand by and watch it get run into the ground by ideology. She handed Ivana her letter of resignation. Ivana was stunned. I don't think she ever imagined that Jane, the bedrock of the entire operation, would actually leave. She tried to backtrack to say they could talk it over, but it was too late. Jane was done. She walked out of that office, came straight to the bar, and told me she was leaving. It felt like a punch to the gut. With Jane gone, I knew it was the beginning of the end. She wished me luck, and for the first time, I saw real sadness in her eyes. "Take care of yourself, Edward," she said. And then she was gone. The news spread through the remaining staff like a wildfire. Jane leaving was a massive blow. 2 of the line cooks quit the next day, out of loyalty to her. Ivana had to scramble to hire new kitchen staff. The quality of the food plummeted almost instantly. Now, we had nothing. The atmosphere was gone, the service was stressed, and the food was becoming mediocre. The last few regulars who had been putting up with the nonsense started to disappear. There was nothing left for them here. The third week felt like a slow-motion funeral. The restaurant was a shell of its former self. Ivana was there every day, her cheerful, defiant facade starting to crack. You could see the panic creeping into her eyes as she surveyed the empty dining room, but she was too proud, too stubborn to ever admit she was wrong. She doubled down. She started posting on the restaurant's social media accounts. Long posts about their brave stance against the patriarchy. Photos of the empty restaurant, framed as a serene and safe space. It backfired spectacularly. The local community pages got a hold of it. People started leaving reviews, dozens of them. Former customers shared their stories of the man tax. The restaurant's online rating, which had been a solid 4.5 stars for years, cratered to a 1.2. Ivana claimed it was a coordinated attack by misogynists. She was in a complete state of denial, living in a reality she had constructed for herself. For me, it was just sad. I spent my shifts polishing glasses that would never be used, staring at empty bar stools. The few customers we did get were mostly curious people who had heard about the controversy. They'd come in, have one drink, look around, and leave. It was like working in a museum exhibit of a failed business. My own breaking point was coming. I knew I couldn't stay much longer. It was about more than the money, which was now terrible. It was about respect. Respect for the job, respect for the customers, and respect for what this place used to be. All of that was gone, and I knew it was time for me to go. 2. The final week arrived, though at the time, I didn't know it would be the last. It just felt like another rotation in the slow, grinding process of the restaurant's death. The staff had been whittled down to a skeleton crew. Just me, 2 waitresses who hadn't found other jobs yet, and a couple of new cooks in the kitchen who were a shadow of Jane's team. Ivana was there constantly, a frantic energy buzzing around her. She was always on her phone, presumably trying to manage the dumpster fire that was the restaurant's online reputation. Sometimes she would try to be encouraging in a way that was completely disconnected from our reality. She'd gather us for a pre-shift huddle in the vast, empty dining room and talk about how we were on the front lines of social change. We'd just stare at her blankly. We were on the front lines of unemployment, and we all knew it. She seemed to think that if she just repeated her beliefs loud enough, they would magically alter the physical world around her. She couldn't grasp that you can't pay the electricity bill with ideology. My last day began like any other in this new bleak era. I came in, set up the bar, sliced my garnishes. The muscle memory of the job was the only thing that kept me going. The afternoon was dead. Not a single customer for lunch. One of the waitresses spent her entire shift in a booth, filling out online job applications. I didn't blame her. Around dinner time, the front door opened. My head snapped up, more out of surprise than anything else. It was a guy I vaguely recognized. He wasn't one of the die-hard regulars, but I'd seen him in here a few times over the years. Just a normal guy, probably in his 40s. Looked like he'd just gotten off work. He sat down at the bar right in front of me. "Long day," he said with a sigh. "Just need a good steak and a cold beer." For a second, it felt like the old days. A customer at my bar looking for a bit of comfort. I poured him a beer from the tap. "You came to the right place," I said, the words feeling hollow and false in my own mouth. He ordered the ribeye, medium rare, one of Jane's signature dishes. I put the order in with a new cook, hoping he wouldn't butcher it too badly. The guy seemed happy just to be sitting there, unwinding. He didn't seem to notice the deafening silence or the sea of empty tables behind him. He was just a man looking for a meal. The cook actually did a decent job on the steak. It came out looking all right. The guy ate his dinner, seemed to enjoy it. He had another beer. We chatted a little bit about sports. It was a completely normal, pleasant interaction. The entire time, I had this growing sense of dread in my stomach. I knew the bill was coming. He finished his meal and pushed his plate away, satisfied. "All right, I'm ready for the check," he said, pulling out his wallet. My hands felt heavy as I printed it out from the terminal. There it was, the food, the drinks, and that one ugly line item, social justice surcharge. I walked over and placed the bill discreetly on the bar in front of him. He glanced down at it. He paused. He picked it up and looked closer. He looked up at me, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "What's this 15% surcharge for?" My moment had come. I had given this speech, or some version of it, dozens of times now. I was tired of it. I was tired of the awkwardness, the anger, the embarrassment. I just didn't have it in me to sell her ideology anymore. So I just told him the truth, without the corporate spin. It's a new policy, I said, my voice flat. The owner adds a 15% charge to any bill paid by a man. His confusion didn't clear. For what? Is it a service charge? No, the staff doesn't get it, I said. She calls it a man tax. It goes to her charities. The man just stared at me for a long moment. He wasn't angry. He just looked weary, disappointed. He let out a slow sigh. You know, he said, shaking his head, all I wanted was a steak. I've had a rough week. I just wanted to sit down, have a nice meal, and not have to think about anything. He looked around the empty restaurant, really seeing it for the first time. This place used to be great, he said quietly. What happened to it? Before I could answer, a third voice cut in. What's happening is that we're fostering an environment of accountability. It was Ivana. She had emerged from the back office and had been listening. She walked up to the bar with that same tight, righteous smile. She looked at the customer. Sir, that small surcharge on your bill is your opportunity to contribute to leveling the playing field for women who have been systemically disadvantaged. The guy just looked at her, then he looked at me. He didn't explain it very well, Ivana continued, shooting a glare in my direction. He failed to communicate the importance of your contribution to the fight against patriarchal oppression. That was it. That was the moment. All the frustration, all the resentment, all the sadness over watching this place I loved die a slow, stupid death. It all just boiled over. But it wasn't a hot anger. It was a cold, quiet calm. I looked at Ivana. I looked at this poor customer who had just been turned into a political pawn. And I knew I was done. I didn't say anything to her. I just turned my attention back to the customer. I took the bill from the bar. I went back to the terminal and voided the entire check. I printed out a new one. The total was 0.0 Surcharge. I walked back and placed it in front of him. It's on the house, I said. I apologize for this. Thank you for coming in. The customer looked at the new bill, then at me, then at Ivana, who was now staring at me with her mouth hanging open, utterly speechless. The guy broke the silence. He smiled a genuine smile for the first time. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, and slid it across the bar to me. For you, he said. Thanks. Then he stood up, nodded at me, and walked out the door, leaving Ivana and me alone in the silence. She found her voice after a moment. It was high-pitched and shaking with rage. What do you think you're doing? You undermine me. You undermine the entire mission of this establishment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. There is no mission, I said, looking her straight in the eye. There is no establishment. Look around you, Ivana. It's over. You failed. I haven't failed, she shrieked. We're building something new. This is just a transition period. No, I said, starting to untie my apron. This is a sinking ship, and I'm getting off. I took off the black apron I had worn for nearly 10 years. I folded it neatly and placed it on the bar, the same bar I had polished thousands of times. You came in here with a sledgehammer and called it progress, I told her. You took a successful, beloved business and you destroyed it in less than a month because you cared more about being right than being successful. You didn't build anything. You just broke something beautiful. Her face was a mixture of fury and shock. I don't think anyone had ever spoken to her like that. I didn't wait for a response. I just said, I quit. I walked out from behind the bar, past her, and headed for the door without looking back. Stepping out into the cool night air felt like coming up for breath after being held underwater for a month. I was unemployed. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I felt a profound sense of relief. I was free. I found out later that I wasn't just the last one to leave. I was the one who turned the lights off. The restaurant didn't open the next day. A simple sign, printed on computer paper, was taped to the front door, closed until further notice. Until further notice turned out to be forever. A week later, Ivana made the official announcement. It was a long, rambling post on the restaurant's now defunct social media page. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting. According to her, the business had been the victim of a targeted misogynistic harassment campaign. She wrote about the economic terrorism waged by men who were too fragile to handle a conversation about their privilege. She blamed the negative online reviews, the lack of community support, the entrenched patriarchal structures of the service industry. She blamed everyone and everything except her own disastrous decisions. She painted herself as a martyr, a brave visionary whose brilliant idea was crushed by a world that wasn't ready for it. The post concluded with a defiant statement. "You can close a restaurant, but you can't silence an idea." The comments section was brutal. It was a mix of mockery from the general public and commiseration from a few of her echo chamber friends. The story became a small local legend for a few weeks, a cautionary tale. The final piece of the story came about a month after that. I got a call. It was Jane. She'd heard what happened on my last night. She just said, "Good for you." Then she told me why she was calling. She had been talking to some people, specifically some of the old regulars from the Oak. A few of them, successful business owners in their own right, had been just as devastated as we were to see the place die. They had made an offer to Ivana to buy the business name, the location, everything. Apparently burdened with debt and failure, she had accepted. Jane was being brought back to run the whole show, and the first person she called was me. She asked me if I wanted my bar back. I didn't even have to think about it. We spent the next month getting the place back into shape. It needed a deep clean, a restocking of everything, and a metaphorical exorcism to get the bad vibes out. We hired back almost all of the old staff who had been forced out. They were all thrilled to come back. We decided to keep the name, The Oak. Jane said it deserved to be redeemed. Our grand reopening was a few weeks ago. We didn't do any big advertising. Jane just made a few calls to some of the old regulars. Word of mouth did the rest. The place was packed. It was like a reunion. All the familiar faces were there. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, the softball guys, all of them. The sound of conversation and laughter filled the room again. Standing behind my bar, looking out at the full house, at people enjoying themselves, at my friends and coworkers all working together again, it was a good feeling. It felt like we had taken back something that was stolen from us. Near the end of the night, one of the softball guys came up to the bar to pay his tab. He handed me his card, and I ran it. As he was signing the slip, he looked at me and grinned. "Hey, Edward," he said, "how much is the man tax tonight?" I just smiled back at him. Tonight and every night, I said, "There's no charge for common sense."